Up for review today, a movie that surprised the hell out of me. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2015 movie Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. Now I have two confessions to make with this one. First, I had no information about this movie whatsoever. I just kept seeing the poster art and the title pop up on my feed. This was apparently made by the creators of 5-second films, and I've always enjoyed those, but I didn't know that. All I saw was the poster art and the name, and it would just constantly be popping up. I would try to be selecting a movie to watch, to review, and it would always be there. And it would always be there staring at me, hey, pick me, pick me. And the second confession is I've been purposefully avoiding it. Not knowing anything about it. Movies, horror movies especially, that are going for comedic levels of so bad that it's good, man, that is a tough thing to pull off, and typically you just wind up with a stinker. I mean, movies like Thanksgiving, that's a movie that's so bad, trying to be so bad that it's good, that it winds up going right back around on itself, and it's just terrible. It can be a fun watch when you're trying to make a group of friends cringe, but other than that, which I have done on Thanksgiving before, and it's been fantastic, but a movie in its own right to review on its own merit, no, it's not good. So, movies like that, they have a time and place, and I will say that getting them on my radar for something that I want to watch, that I have to be in a really particular mindset for that. And, as it turns out, I was in the particular mindset for this. Battling this cold has been a nightmare. It's been really prevalent and just like constantly sticking around. But I found myself the other night in a situation where I just didn't have the mental fortitude to undergo anything really cerebral. There's like zero chance I was going to pay attention to anything that had subtitles in it. So I kind of, in a fogged brain state, I needed something mindless. So finally I'm going through the queue and there's Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. Hey, pick me, pick me. Okay, you know what? Fine. I'm going to pick you, I'm going to watch you, and I'm going to just plow through it, and then I'm going to do a review, and what I found was a movie that was genuinely, heartwarmingly hilarious, while at the same time being an absolute love song to the slasher subgenre of horror. And it really did surprise me just how funny I found this movie. Taking comedic levels of horror and putting that in a movie, even comedies, just take horror out of it. Okay, for the next few seconds, I'm not a horror movie reviewer, I'm just a movie reviewer. What is the success level of comedy, especially when we go with the rapid-fire, low-brow, spoof kind of levels of comedy? What makes it success? I mean, we have the upper level of the pantheon of like Naked Gun, and then its following sequels started to really drop off in quality. But then let's go back just 10-15 years ago, and we wound up having that slew of spoof movies, and it started with the Scary Movie franchise, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we wound up with Epic Movie and Superhero Movie and so on and so forth. And they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. But just analyzing them, they had the same levels of rapid-fire, low-brow comedy. So what made one work and the others not? And I think ultimately, not to get too sappy on you, but ultimately what it comes down to is love. Those movies that really weren't that successful, that what they were doing was they were taking just pop culture segments that were prevalent in society and making references to them. There were no love for superhero movies. There was no love for the 300 movie and the spoof of it during Epic Movie. There was no love for that. It was just references. And this movie could have easily gotten away with taking the slasher subgenre and just making references, but it was very clear in how they executed them, with the over-the-top nature of the humor and the over-the-top nature of the gore and the taking it and putting a funhouse mirror in front of it, that there was so much love for this subgenre that came through in the humor of them deconstructing and analyzing it. Now, I'm going to do my best to try and analyze this film And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the categories here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot gets the lowest points of all. But, I mean, that's the tough one, because really there isn't a whole lot of plot to be had here. What this does is it takes the character of Brock Cherino, and he summarizes through narration and, visual mapping of the narration the previous 2 Dude Bro Party Massacre movies that don't really exist. And at the end of his summarization, where now we're up to speed, he dies. He gets slaughtered by the same killer of Motherface that was in the first 2 movies. A lot of air quotes going on here. So the killer came back, and at the start of Dude Bro Party Massacre 3, now that we're all caught up, kills our main character of Brock Cherino. Enter in his identical twin brother of Brent Cherino, as now he is going to the fraternity and trying to investigate what happened with his brother Brock. Infiltrate, get some information, and see if the threat is still prevalent. Basically, why did his brother die? And so he joins the fraternity, and they take him on the, hazing rituals and initiation rituals, and then going out camping kind of thing, where they all encounter the 3rd instance of the Motherface killer. There really isn't a whole lot of plot to be had here, and a lot of it honestly feels like where a writer might get caught in the corner. They paint themselves into a corner, and now they have to really be delicate and finding their way out of the situation they've written themselves in. If the writers found themselves in a position here, then they just went as ludicrous as possible to get themselves out of it. Oh, well, that character isn't a character, it's a bag of oranges, and it has been the whole time. It's ludicrous, but it works. But my scoring system is universal across all subgenres of horror. So, taking the plot and scoring it on the same even playing field as The Exorcist or any other film that has very, very well thought out plot intricacies and character development and all of that, I really can't score it above 8 out of 25. It was hilarious, and what they had was great, and that brings us to the intent category. And the intention of this movie was to be as silly as possible while being as gory as possible and making me laugh as much as possible. And on that note, it succeeded wildly. Not all of the jokes landed, but when they come that fast, even a 75% success rate is a really high level of humor. And I would say that it achieved at least that, maybe more. So making me laugh, making me cringe, looking at all this gore, and looking at all the love that it has for the slasher subgenre, I can't help but give it a really, really high intent score. This is why I have the intent category. I've been asked that a few times. Well, what's the difference between, plot and intent? Well, the intent is what it is trying to convey, and I really want to make room for movies like this when I grade horror films. This is the kind of movie that would come across the desk of any film reviewer and get marks down. And I think that there's a place for this, especially if I'm just strictly reviewing horror films. There is absolutely a place for this where it deserves some high scores, and the intent is why I have it. The acting, I thought they did a fairly decent job. I mean, it's a little difficult to grade, to be perfectly honest, but the humor was well executed, and that was ultimately what they were there for. They were there to be just in the middle of these ridiculous situations, taking it with a grain of salt and delivering their jokes. And I think on that note, they did fairly well, but it wasn't anything like stellar acting where I could really grade it on the same level of, well, to go back to The Exorcist, like Ellen Burstyn or Linda Blair. So 14 out of 25 there. And the technical, I actually give some pretty high marks to as well, just because the gore there was really prevalent. It was a surprising amount of blood and guts and so on and practical effects, and what they had was fairly well executed. It was one of the aspects of the humor visually that came through really, really well. Anything that was really cheesy there, I'm just going to give the marks and basically say, well, that's the ultimate goal of it anyway. I mean, there were obvious technical goofs here that were absolutely purposeful. If you had Brock and Brent Chirino talking to one another in the same frame, one of them would reach out his hand, and in a split screen thing, his fingers would disappear. To me, that was absolutely purposeful. It was hilarious. I loved seeing that happen, especially since I, at one point in my life, way back when, did editing for a film where I did have to have the same actor on both sides and do a split screen and never have them meet because of that technical error that would happen. It's a really difficult thing to pull off, especially with maintaining even lighting. But the fact that they just went for it and had that technical error in there, I can't help but think that, of course, it was purposeful. Of course, it was humorous. And I'm not going to give any marks down for any of the technical issues that this movie might have had. So would I recommend this movie? You know what? If you want to laugh and you want to revel in silly fraternity hijinks with gore and all sorts of kills and so on, I really think that you can't do a whole lot better than this movie. And I'm extraordinarily surprised to be hearing myself say that after all this time of purposefully backburnering this movie. I really wish I could go back in time, slap myself in the face, and say, watch Dude Bro Party Massacre 3 and watch it tonight. So ultimately what I'm doing is I'm telling you that. This is a movie that is absolutely worth watching, even though it may not be the best in the world. It is one of the funniest horror films I've ever seen. So that should about do it. That's my review of Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.